Eleni, lots of people ask about the impacts of events. To answer this, obviously we need evidence, but there are challenges in doing this. Could you outline what these challenges are?
Yes, impact of events needs to be perceived as a multidimensional concept. When we talk about impact, we need to consider what happens to the economy, what happens to the environment, to the society, what happens in politics in some ways. So there are various themes in which we can consider impact. And that is a challenge because we don't have enough resources to capture adequately impact under all these various themes. At the same time, we have the added challenge of the fact that there are different impacts occurring at different points in time. For example, in the build-up of the games, obviously we have more pollution because we're digging the roads, we're building stadia, these seas, and then we have different types of impacts during games time, when of course everything is ready, of course that is good for the community who can use the facilities, and then we have all the global spotlight during games time, and then there are different impacts at the legacy stage, when we need to ask questions, for example, who is using the village? Is there social cohesion in that environment? Is transport appropriate? Have the plans worked post the event? So there's the temporal dimension of impact that we need to consider. And finally, there are impacts occurring in different geographies. We may think this is the London Games, but there are impacts for the greater UK, there are impacts for the countries that are competing in the event, especially if they have a unique performer who is achieving fame in the track and field, or in the arena, or in the stadium. So there is the geographical dimension of impact, and again the challenge is to capture it, to be able to say, yes, I actually have a view of everything that is happening. Otherwise we are occupied with the headlines of this is happening there and that is happening somewhere else, and we are lost in the volume of the detail.
Thank you. You mentioned that during games time there are particular impacts under various themes and manifesting themselves in the various geographies. Can you give us some examples of these?
Yes. The biggest impact that occurs in the host city is all the influx of the various participants and also their entourage, sponsors, physiotherapists, team officials, but most importantly all the tourists and the visitors, to also include visitors from the UK who will be travelling to London. So there is a tremendous economic impact. There's money being spent, things are being bought, investment is made in the tourism industry, which is important in that respect. At the same time we have a major area of impact which includes civil liberties, and this a lot will depend on how authorities deal with dissenting voices. For example, how are we going to deal with security? Of course the plans are very sound, but is there going to be a perception that liberties are limited? Will people feel that they have been given right access to catch some of the glory of that event, to catch sight of the athlete, or will they feel excluded? So civil liberties will be an access, and issues of security, I think, will be another area where we can actually measure impact. Of course, London will be under the global spotlight, and this is a great opportunity for advertising what London has to offer. But beyond that, the hope is that teams of tourists and teams of visiting participants will travel to other parts of the country when maybe after they finish the games. And as regards the tourists, hopefully that they will come even up to Scotland to participate as spectators in the Edinburgh festivals before they come to watch the Paralympics. Civic pride is going to be very high because the spotlight is on, because we feel proud that the British team is doing well, and hopefully they will be doing well because that will have implications. The better the performance, the higher the spirit. And that reflects on maybe political impact for the governance of London. Another dimension of impact is, and finally the thing I want to say, is that there will be things happening nationwide. For example, before the games there are training camps taking place all over the country, beyond London. So there will be impact there, spending there, civic pride by the people who are proud, the communities which are proud to host the Jamaican team, the team from Ghana, for example. So there will be impact at the various geographical levels, which I think captures the dimension of the geography which we mentioned earlier.
To answer the question of was it worth the investment, there'll have to be people capturing data. Where does the data captured during games time fit with that from build-up, and will we need to capture more in legacy?
You're right to point out the link with impacts from the previous phase. And yes, there will be accumulation of that data. So the build-up period impact will have to be considered along the impact data from the games time. And again, we need to have a very long-term view of when capturing data as regards legacy, so that we can actually say yes, at the legacy stage things have worked or things haven't worked in particular areas. The data is being captured under various schemes. Of course, there are academics who do research and PhD studies taking place, but also the Department of Culture, Media and Sport is evaluating that sort of document base of studies in order to make some summative statement of what the data is revealing. And I think they call it the meta-evaluation approach to that work. There is a program called Olympic Games Impact, and it has been applied to the Vancouver Games, where I was actually advising also in the development of indicators of how to measure impact. And they sought to capture it in terms of what has happened in the build-up period, during games, and legacy period. And that is a program that is also taking place and taking shape in London, whereby we are capturing through various indicators. And ideally, these results will be presented in a meaningful way for the people to have a big summative picture. Now, in the case of Vancouver, they are also using control city of Alberta, where the games didn't happen. So they are comparing data from the two cities. So it's quite a well-established, clearly, strongly defined research framework to capture impact. And that is definitely a step in the right direction in the effort to capture this multidimensional concept of events impact.
Thank you.